He looked at me and said, "This was never supposed to happen." The first time I noticed the silence between us, it was louder than anything she'd ever said. We were standing in her kitchen, late afternoon light stretching across the counter like it was tired of holding itself together. She was rinsing a mug she'd already washed once. I leaned against the doorframe, pretending I was only there because I'd forgotten my jacket. That's what I told myself, anyway. "This was never supposed to happen," I said. The words came out softer than I expected, like they were asking permission. She didn't look at me right away. She was in her mid-40s, old enough to know better, young enough to still feel things she didn't plan on. There was a calm about her that made people assume she was untouched by mess. They were wrong. I could see it in the way she held her shoulders a little too still, like movement might give something away. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands refusing to cooperate, brushing the side of her neck when she shifted. I noticed things like that too easily. That should have been my first warning. I was 24, old enough to know what wanting someone felt like, young enough to believe wanting was enough. "We're just talking," she said finally. But the mug stayed in her hands, unmoving, water dripping down her fingers. Talking, right? That's what it had started as. Conversations that lasted too long. Pauses that felt intentional. Me sitting across from her, listening too closely, watching her mouth shape words that stayed with me longer than they should have. There was history she didn't explain and I didn't ask about. I could feel it anyway, in the way she flinched when her phone buzzed, or how she smiled with only half her face sometimes. She had learned how to hold herself back. I hadn't. "I should go," I said, not moving. She finally turned to look at me then. Her eyes didn't accuse. That was worse. They searched, like she was checking for damage she'd already decided she was responsible for. "You don't have to," she said. And then, quieter, "But you probably should." That sentence stayed suspended between us. It wasn't a boundary. It wasn't an invitation. It was something fragile, balancing on a decision neither of us wanted to make first. I noticed my hands were clenched. I loosened them, then clenched them again. She noticed too. Her gaze dropped for half a second, then lifted back to my face like it hadn't. The room felt too small for how far apart we were standing. "I don't think I came here by accident," I said. I hated how honest that sounded. Her breath caught. Not dramatically, just enough to be real. She set the mug down too carefully. When she stepped closer, it wasn't fast. It was cautious, measured like she was testing ice. "You're not confused," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," I said. "I'm not." That was the moment something shifted. Not exploded. Shifted. Like I didn't mean to learn her history the way I did. Through the cracks, not the story. She turned away from me after that, busying herself with the counter like it had suddenly become important. I watched the muscles in her back tighten under her sweater. That's when I realized how careful she always was. Like every movement had been edited before it happened. "You shouldn't be here this late," she said, still not looking at me. I know. That was becoming a pattern. Me knowing. Me staying anyway. I'd met her months earlier, through something ordinary enough to feel safe at the time. She was supposed to be neutral ground. A woman with a life already built, responsibilities already assigned. Someone I admired in a way that felt respectful. Until it didn't. Until admiration started lingering. She was married. Not happily, but still. The ring wasn't on her finger anymore, but the absence of it felt heavier than if it were. She never spoke badly about him. That somehow made it worse. Like she was protecting a promise even while stepping outside it. "I don't want to be someone who ruins things," she said suddenly. Her voice was steady. Her hands weren't. "I'm not asking you to," I replied, then paused. "I just don't want to pretend this isn't happening." She laughed softly at that. Not because it was funny, because it was too close to the truth. "You think I haven't tried pretending?" she asked. "You think I don't notice when you show up for no reason? Or when you sit too close and then act like you didn't?" My chest tightened. I hadn't realized she'd been watching me watch her. "I didn't plan this," I said. "I didn't wake up and decide to want you." That got her attention. She turned then, really turned, and for a second her face gave everything away. The exhaustion, the restraint. The part of her that missed being looked at like she mattered instead of like she was holding something together for everyone else. "You're young," she said, not dismissive. "Careful. You'll meet someone who doesn't come with complications." The words sat between us like a warning sign neither of us respected. "Maybe," I said, "but that doesn't change what's already here." I hated how much I meant it. She stepped closer without deciding to. I could tell by the way she froze once she realized how little space was left between us. Her hand brushed mine, accidental enough to be deniable, intentional enough to be felt. Her fingers were warm. That detail stayed with me longer than it should have. Neither of us moved it away. "I don't trust myself around you," she whispered. Not accusing, confessing. Something in my chest eased at that. Not relief, exactly. Recognition. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere a phone buzzed. Life continuing like nothing was about to change. She didn't pull back, and I didn't let go. The doorbell rang like it had a sense of timing. She flinched first. Not a big reaction, just a sharp inhale, a tightening through her shoulders. Her hand slipped from mine before either of us acknowledged it had been there at all. Suddenly the space between us felt rehearsed again, like we'd both snapped back into roles we knew too well. "Don't move," she said, then immediately shook her head. She didn't finish. She never did when panic edged in. I stayed where I was anyway, heart beating faster than the situation technically deserved. She walked toward the door, smoothing her sweater down like it could erase what had almost happened. I watched her from the kitchen, every instinct telling me I shouldn't be here when it opened. But I was. Her husband's voice came through before I saw him. Familiar to her. New to me. Calm. Polite. The kind of voice that assumed it still belonged in this house. "I was in the area," he said. "Thought I'd stop by." The pause before she answered was short, but I caught it. "That's unexpected," she said, forcing a lightness that didn't quite land. He stepped inside, eyes already moving, taking inventory. When his gaze found me, it didn't linger long, but it lingered enough. "Oh," he said. I didn't realize you had company." She turned to look at me then, like she'd just remembered I existed, like she was deciding how much of me to explain. She stopped, restarted. "He's a friend." Friend. The word landed awkwardly, too small for the air it was asked to fill. I nodded, smiled, did everything I was supposed to. My pulse kept betraying me anyway. "Nice to meet you," he said, extending a hand. I shook it. His grip was firm, confident, unaware. That somehow made it worse. I felt like I was standing in someone else's place, borrowing something I hadn't earned. They talked. About nothing. About errands. About traffic. I stood there listening, watching the woman I wanted slide back into a version of herself that didn't include me. She leaned against the counter again, arms crossed now. Not guarded, just careful. I told myself this was the moment I should leave. That staying would mean choosing something I couldn't undo. Instead, I stayed quiet. Eventually, he checked his watch, said he had to go, kissed her cheek in a way that felt practiced, familiar. She didn't lean into it. She didn't pull away either. When the door closed behind him, the house didn't relax. It tightened. "I should go," I said, finally meaning it this time. She didn't answer right away. She walked back into the kitchen, leaned against the counter again, stared at the spot where my hand had been minutes ago. "This is why," she said softly. "This is why I can't, I know." I cut in. "I know what this costs." She looked up at me then, eyes shining but steady. "Do you?" I opened my mouth to answer. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say I didn't care. Instead, I stepped closer, not touching, just close enough for the truth to feel dangerous. She didn't move away that I didn't sleep that night. Or the next one. Every sound outside my apartment made me think of her door closing behind him again. Every pause on my phone lighting up felt deliberate, like silence chosen on purpose. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself this was what restraint looked like. Then she didn't answer my message. Not the short one. Not the follow-up I pretended was casual. Hours passed. long enough for my thoughts to get reckless. By the time I saw her again, I was already halfway to saying something I couldn't take back. She was standing outside the cafe, near her place, sunglasses on even though the sun had dipped low. Her posture was calm, too calm, like she'd practiced being fine. "You didn't have to come," she said. "You didn't answer," I replied. She sighed, pushing the door open and stepping inside. I followed without asking. The place was nearly empty. A couple in the corner. Music low, the kind of quiet that listens. "I'm trying to do the right thing," she said once we sat down. She wrapped her hands around her cup, didn't drink. "And you showing up makes that harder." That stung more than I expected. "So what?" I said, leaning forward, voice low. "You just disappear? That's the right thing." Her jaw tightened. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make this about you being hurt," she snapped, then stopped herself. Her voice softened. "This isn't a game. I have a life that didn't start with you." "I know," I said. "Too fast. I know that. But you don't get to pretend I don't exist when it gets inconvenient." She looked at me then. Really looked. Took off her sunglasses and set them down like armor she didn't want to wear anymore. "I'm scared," she admitted. The words came out small. Honest. "I'm scared of wanting something I can't justify." That did something to me. Opened a door I'd been leaning against for days. "I saw him," I said. "The way he looks at you. Like he still belongs there." Her eyes flickered. "Just once." "He does," she said quietly. "In some ways." Something ugly twisted in my chest. Not anger. Something closer to panic. "And where does that leave me?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers traced the rim of the cup. Slow, distracted. "That's the problem," she said. "You're not supposed to be anywhere." I stood up. Too quickly. The chair scraped the floor. A couple heads turned. "I can't keep being the thing you only acknowledge when the door's closed," I said. "I can't be your almost." Her throat worked like she wanted to say something and didn't trust it. "I don't want you to be," she whispered. The space between us felt electric now. Charged. Dangerous. "Then tell me," I said, stepping closer. "Tell me to walk away and mean it." She stood too. We were inches apart. I could smell her perfume. Something familiar. Something I associated with quiet afternoons and unfinished conversations. Her hand lifted. Stopped just short of my chest. "I don't know if I can," she said. Neither of us moved. And for the first time, I wasn't sure who would break first that I found out by accident, which somehow made it worse. Her phone was on the table between us, face down, buzzing softly like it didn't want to interrupt. We were still standing there in the cafe, suspended in that moment where neither of us had stepped back yet. She hadn't touched me. I hadn't asked her to. Everything felt fragile enough already. She glanced at the phone, hesitated, then flipped it over. I wasn't trying to read it. I swear I wasn't. But the screen lit up, and her name wasn't the one at the top. Unknown number. One new voicemail. Her face changed. Not panic. Something more final. "I need to listen to this," she said. She turned slightly away from me, thumb hovering, then pressed play. I caught fragments before she angled the phone closer to her ear. "Can't pretend anymore. Made my decision. Papers are filed." Her shoulders slumped like she'd been holding them up on borrowed strength. When the message ended, she didn't look at me. She didn't put the phone down either. "You were going to tell me," I said, not accusing, stating something I needed to be true. "Yes," she said quickly. Too quickly. Today got away from me." "Tell me what?" I asked. She exhaled, long and shaky, then finally met my eyes. There was no softness left in her expression now, just resolve edged with sadness. "I'm leaving," she said. The word landed hard, heavier than I expected. "Leaving him?" I asked, my voice already bracing. "Leaving everything," she said. "The house. The routine. This neighborhood." She swallowed. "This situation." I laughed once, short and humorless. "So, this is you doing the right thing again." "That's not fair," she said, but her voice cracked. "I didn't do this because of you." "That's the problem," I shot back. "You keep making choices like I'm not even part of the equation." She stepped closer then, finally closing the distance she'd been avoiding. Her hand found my arm, fingers curling like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. "You are," she said fiercely. "You're the reason I can't stay." That should have felt like something. Validation. Relief. Instead, it felt like the ground giving way. "So what?" I said quietly. "You blow up your life and I just watch you go." Her grip tightened. "I was trying to protect you." "From what?" I asked. "Wanting you." She looked down. That was answer enough. "I can't ask you to wait," she said. "And I can't promise I'll come back." Something cold settled in my chest. Not anger. Understanding. The kind that hurts more. "You already decided," I said. She nodded once. "This morning." That was the betrayal. Not that she was leaving, but that she'd stood inches from me earlier. Let me hope. Let me almost touch her, knowing she was already halfway gone. I gently pulled my arm from her hand. "Then don't make this harder by pretending we're still deciding," I said. Her eyes filled, but she didn't stop me when I stepped back. As I turned toward the door, she said my name, just once, like a question she didn't want answered. I stopped, didn't turn around, because if I did, I wasn't sure I'd still be able to let her leave that I didn't make it past the corner. I stood there longer than I want to admit, staring at nothing, replaying her voice, saying this morning like it was a verdict. I told myself walking away was dignity, that letting her go was proof I wasn't selfish. Then my phone vibrated. Not a call, a message. One line. "I'm at the house. Please come back. If you don't, I'll understand." That last part is what did it. Not the asking, her giving me permission to disappear. I turned around. She was sitting on the front steps when I got there, shoes kicked off, arms wrapped around herself like she'd been cold for hours. The door behind her was closed. Not slammed. Closed on purpose. "You shouldn't be here," she said when she saw me. "I know," I replied. "I keep doing that." She gave a weak smile. It didn't reach her eyes. "I'll listen to the voicemail again," she said. I realized something. I waited. Let the silence do its work. "I've spent years making decisions that looked responsible from the outside," she continued. "Staying, enduring, explaining things away." She looked down at her hands. I told myself that was love. I sat beside her, close enough to feel the warmth she pretended she didn't need. "And now?" I asked. "Now I'm terrified," she said honestly, "because wanting you doesn't feel responsible. It feels like jumping." I swallowed. "You don't owe me a jump." "I know." She turned to me then, eyes bare. No restraint left. But I owe myself one. I didn't touch her. Not yet. This felt like a moment that needed to breathe. "I filed the papers," she said. "That part is real. I can't undo it. And I'm not asking you to fix what I broke." "I'm not trying to," I said. "I'm asking you," she went on, voice shaking now. "If you're still here when I stop pretending this doesn't matter." That was it. No speeches. No promises she couldn't keep. Just the truth laid out like something fragile. I reached for her then. Slow. Giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Her forehead rested against my shoulder first. Then her hand found my chest, fingers gripping fabric like proof. When she looked up, her eyes were wet but steady. "This might cost you," she whispered. "I already paid," I said. I stayed. That's when she kissed me. Not rushed. Not desperate. Careful, like she was relearning something she'd put down years ago. When she pulled back, her hand stayed on my face, thumb brushing my cheek like she was making sure I was real. "We don't know what this looks like tomorrow," she said. "No," I agreed. "But I know what this is right now." She nodded, leaned into me again, this time without hesitation. The door behind us stayed closed. And for the first time, neither of us was standing on the wrong side of it, that we didn't rush anything after that. That surprised me most. People think choosing love looks dramatic. Packed bags, slammed doors, declarations made in the rain. What it actually looked like was quiet mornings and unanswered questions we didn't force yet. It looked like her sitting at the small table by the window, reading the same page twice. It looked like me learning when to speak and when not to. She moved out 2 weeks later. Not far, just enough to breathe. I helped carry boxes, careful not to touch the ones labeled old life. She noticed, smiled the kind of smile that said she saw me trying. There were consequences. Of course there were. Awkward conversations, long pauses, a few looks from people who thought they understood the story better than we did. Sometimes she'd go quiet after a phone call, guilt flickering across her face like a reflex she hadn't unlearned yet. Sometimes I'd catch myself pulling back, afraid of asking for too much. We talked about those moments. Not perfectly, sometimes late, sometimes clumsily. "I don't want to hurt anyone else," she said one night, staring at the ceiling. "I don't want to disappear just to make things easier," I replied. We learned how to sit with that without turning it into a fight. The age gap didn't vanish. It stopped being the point. She brought experience. I brought stubborn hope. We met somewhere in the middle, where honesty mattered more than appearances. One evening, months later, we stood in that same kitchen again. Different house. Same light. She was washing a mug she'd only used once. "You know," she said, "I used to think wanting something meant I was failing at self-control. And now?" I asked. "And now I think ignoring it almost ruined me." She turned, dried her hands, and rested her forehead against my chest the way she had that night on the steps. Familiar. Chosen. I realized then that ending up together didn't mean the story stopped being complicated. It meant we stopped pretending complication was a reason to walk away. I still catch her watching me sometimes. Like she's surprised she didn't miss this life by choosing safety over truth for so long. When I notice, she doesn't look away. Neither do I. "This wasn't supposed to happen," I said to her once, half smiling. She answered without hesitation. "It was just not the way we planned." And that's the truth of it. Love didn't save us. Honesty did. Love just showed up once we stopped lying to ourselves. If you've ever wanted something that didn't fit the timeline you were given, if you've ever stood in a doorway not knowing which side of yourself to choose, then maybe you understand why we stayed. We didn't win. We chose. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? And that scared both of us more than the doorbell ever could.